Greetings, my little superstars! Ruppy here, your ringmaster for the Columbus Swoo Amazing Digital Circus Edition! Our funny buddies are now 3-0 in the UNPL Spring Fling, courtesy of a successful party last week that saw some incredible feats from the likes of Pomni and Jax to set the stage for Gummy Goo to hijack a syrup tanker and run right over the opposition. Rewinding back to last week, I did say you should never doubt the power of a choice scarf crocodile. There's a reason it's been the bane of my existence for so many years. Anywho, week 4 of Spring Fling fun continues the odd trend of facing winless teams with deceptively dangerous rosters that could easily wipe us out, forcing our little superstars to once again have to really think outside the tent. Today's adventure is Hungry Hippos! Not the version by Milton Bradley. This week's adventure sees our funny buddies squaring off with the Hyde Park Hippos, coached by Kingler. Not to be confused with our dear friend Kingler. Hopefully I'm not confusing all of you with all this talk of mixing things up because everything sounds so similar. That's a problem for the world you all exist in and not the amazing Digital Circus. Getting back on track here. Oh, let's see, where the heck was I? Oh, right! Kingler's roster has a lot of offensive firepower aimed right at us, hoping to burn our circus to the ground. How rude! Hawlucha is a monster that we may very well have little to no answers for if it pops a psychic seed, courtesy of the wacky terrain set up by that PSI powerhouse Indeedee, unburdening itself in flying circles around our performers. Haxorus is just raw power incarnate. Blastoise can either be a bulky pain or decide to smash its shell right in our face to wash us away. Wo-Chien and Vileplume are interesting Tera captains that could drain us dry like vampires if we're not careful. So many possible nightmares to haunt our dear friends and have them teetering on the brink of abstraction. That, however, is precisely why we're locking ourselves in the kitchen to do some serious cooking this week. The ice and flying weaknesses on Kingler's roster do provide us with a few ideas on where to start. So let's get our head bubble chef to work in prepping the kitchen. First up on the menu, Kaufmo! Our funny bird clown is back this week with a rather interesting recipe to try and prove himself the superior bird to Hawlucha. 80 speed EVs with a timid nature is enough to always outrun that feathered fiend without a choice scarf or prior to any unburdened shenanigans. Feather Dance is an interesting addition to his performance to strip away any potential attack boosts and entrance Hawlucha and all its physical friends to take a step back on wanting to pick a fight. Roost keeps Kaufmo healthy and happy, and Air Slash is our primary weapon of choice for cutting through Kingler's forces, with the addition of U-Turn to get on out of there if the show starts going south. With a Charty Berry and this defensive investment, Kaufmo can even survive a +2 Stone Edge from the Luchador of Legend, and hopefully retire them before the curtain falls. Next, we have the Gummy Bandit with a plan so nice, we just had to see it twice. Coming back for an encore, it's Gummy Goo! That's right, Gummy Goo is once again wearing a choice scarf like a bandana around his neck to pick up right where he left off last week with his cavity-inducing capers. We've tweaked the EVs this time around to benchmark for an adamant +1 speed Haxorus, just to punish Kingler for trying to get a little extra power with some speed-boosting shenanigans of their very own. Earthquake and Knockoff make a return as Gummy Goo's stab tools of choice, but we're also packing Thunderfang to try and throw Hawlucha out of the ring before it can get any momentum going, as well as Skitter Smack to try and get a live Wo-Chien reaction out of the ancient snail before it hopefully gets a chance to put on any funny crystal hats. Since we're facing Kingler, then it only makes sense for Kinger to come and try to assert dominance. Or at least clear up any misconceptions because of how similar their names are. Anyway, Kinger is running a Sub-Pataya set this week, with agility to try and set himself up to potentially be the hero of today's adventure if all goes well. He's also running Torrent this week to take further advantage of having to be at low health for this silly scheme to work, further boosting the power of Surf to wash away all of our problems. He's also packing Ice Beam to take advantage of that weakness, hoping that with all these tools at his disposal, he can walk away proudly with an insect collection made up of his fallen foes. Hey guys, adding Ruppy cutting in here for a moment. If you're a little confused about the EVs for this plan with Empoleon, don't worry, I am too. Truth be told, a lot of the prep was kind of done in a bit of a tired haze after a long day of work and having to play this game pretty early the next morning, so I definitely made a few mistakes that I'd normally take more time to iron out before actually getting the team together for battle. But I'll go a little more in-depth on that once we get into the battle itself, so just keep that in mind. Now, since Kingler's roster has so many potential setup threats, we need a way to kind of dance around the issue if the Cobra Kai method of striking first and striking hard doesn't pan out too well for us. That's where Jax comes in this week. With heavy-duty boots to ignore any rocks that may be thrown around our side of the field, and Regenerator to remain a healthy nuisance, Jax's whole shtick this week is to be, well, exactly that. 112 speed EVs with a jolly nature lines him up with Kaufmo, as always being able to outrun Hawlucha prior to any unburdened antics. Rapid Spin keeps our field nice and clean while also boosting his speed, and Knockoff is for getting rid of items and trying to make setting up a challenge for Kingler's crew. Dragon Tail further complicates that issue by dealing damage and forcing switches just when it looks like we might finally be on the ropes. And Ice Spinner is Jax's secret surprise this week to mow down Indeedee's psychic terrain and hopefully keep the tag team threat with Hawlucha neutralized. Our last two Mons both have similar ideas on how to finish off this 6-course meal of mayhem, and either one could be the chef that cooks up the win this week. Starting with Gangle! Our joyous bundle of ribbons has her own recipe for disaster that even uses Kingler's roster for potential ingredients. She has just enough speed to always outrun a Haxorus before it gets cooking, and is packing her usual utensils of Freeze Dry and Tera Blast, this week with more dirt and earthy texture thanks to the ground Tera type. Recover keeps her comedy mask intact, and she could very well enjoy it this week thanks to her secret ingredient, Acid Armor! With investment in her otherwise fragile physical bulk and the ability to boost, Gangle could quickly go from a glass cannon to being an impenetrable mountain. But she's not done yet, our dear friends on the other side of your screens! Since Shell Smash is an enticing entree for Blastoise to bring to this game, especially with ground as her Tera type of choice, Gangle is also looking to garnish her dish with a Mirror Herb to copy those boosts on top of her Acid Armor, potentially sealing the deal and taking this adventure to the freezer. And just in case that doesn't work, we have Ragatha rounding out today's menu. Ragatha has more of a bulky approach in mind to Gangle's idea, running the same EV spread as she did for last week's adventure to be able to take hits from the likes of Haxorus and Hawlucha before tabling the turns right back on them. That is what the kids say these days, right? Anyways, Ragatha will seek to take a calm mind approach to this chaos, with Moonblast's powerful stab and mystical fire to roast that Tinkaton like a digital chestnut. As her secret ingredient of choice, she's also packing Store Power, hoping to take advantage of any of her Calm Mind boosts, plus any extra boosts she may rack up through her own Mirror Herb, to impersonate a steamroller and run right over her competition. That's the roster for today's adventure. It's Danny Mac, Dapper Snapper, and Jacob as always, all had a hand in coding today's roster, and the help is greatly appreciated. So, can our funny buddies whip up a 5-star buffet beatdown? Will Hawlucha come flying off the top rope and crashing down on all our hopes and dreams? Let's find out! Alright guys, it is battle time. So, as you have probably picked up on the fact that the screen is kind of frozen, this is a post-com. Truth be told, I did do a live com for this, but listening back to it, I wasn't really too happy with it. Long story short, we played this game pretty early in the morning, I think about 7:30ish almost. Because the plan was to get it knocked out before I had to go to work that morning, just so it was done out of the way. I don't think Kingler had any other times that really could have worked. and I had been up late the night before because I believe I had a closing shift the night before, and I still had to actually finish prepping my team. So there were some prep discrepancies that I will touch on when we get to them, but basically my commentary had really long gaps of silence in it, longer than I think I am usually guilty of, that I try to edit out. It was basically almost like I didn't do commentary at all. I know I was awake doing that battle, and I know I was thinking through my plays at least, but I think my brain was struggling to actually communicate with my mouth to actually do commentary. Even just mumbling whatever thoughts would have, kind of like in a thinking out loud scenario as to what my plays would have been. So yeah, I figured post-com was the way to go here, just because, to be perfectly honest, this is probably going to be a lot better than actually trying to make anything work with the live com I did do. Hopefully this will not be a habit. I'm usually pretty proud of my live comms, even though they're not always the greatest. It's something I'm trying to work on, but this one was especially bad, and I just had to post-com this one because there was barely any commentary in the live com to actually work with. Anyway, looking at what Kingler brought, it's most of what I expected to see. I was maybe a tiny bit surprised to not see Chandelure or Donphan, but for the most part, Kingler had the kind of roster that just about any combination of it could have come, and it really wouldn't have surprised me. Chandelure was probably the biggest surprise I didn't see out of it. Anyway, getting into the battle itself, he's going to give me a live Wo-Chien reaction right out of the gate as I lead with Kaufmo, the Kilowattrel. And after a bit of potential lag that kind of scared me a bit, and we were going to disconnect, Tablets of Ruin are going to kick in, and the battle is now underway. So I have a feeling he's going to Terrasilize right out of the gate. He did reveal to me this thing was Tera Steel, and obviously Vileplume, his other Tera Captain, did not come, so I thought it was probably going to Terrasilize right out of the gate because I could potentially Hurricane or Air Slash or even U-turn out in this thing and cause big damage. So I figured I would just go ahead and U-turn out, preserve Kilowattrel for its intended purpose, which was the Hawlucha matchup, as he does in fact just go ahead and Terrasilize. I figured a knockoff was probably coming, so ultimately I believe I kind of debated back and forth on what I wanted to do for a minute. I believe Kingler was what I was considering just because he was Tera Steel. I didn't think he would go for a grass move, I guess. I thought it was safe. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized he's probably going to knock off. And Jax is honestly the Mon with the item I would prefer to lose out of anything I have, aside from maybe Kaufmo, which just switched out. So I do just send Jax in to take the knockoff. He loses his boots, which is perfectly fine. I'm just going to fire off a knockoff right back to get rid of whatever item this thing has, and then go from there. Turns out this thing was holding Light Clay right as he sets up a Reflect, so that thing is only going to be up for 5 turns instead of 8. So that was definitely a worthwhile endeavor. I figure the light screen is probably going up now because he's got little reason to just not set up both screens at this point. So taking advantage of that, I decided to go ahead and go into Kingler and get that plan off the ground, as he does in fact just go ahead and set up the light screen. Now, for the next couple turns, I'm going to attempt to substitute, as he just repeatedly uses knockoff. And I mentioned it in the Teambuilder part, and I'm going to talk about it now. I mis-EV'd this Empoleon, and this was a prep mistake, not a genning mistake. This is why I probably should not have prepped while being extremely tired and trying to get something together so I could gen it and get ready for the battle in the morning. Because what ultimately happens is, I repeatedly sub, not necessarily to stall out the screens, though that is part of it, but just to get to this point where I can pop my Pitaya Berry and then go from there. I have enough HP where at this point I am in Torrent range, so that is definitely going for me as the Reflect wears off. But I am just out. I have just enough HP that I'm out of range of popping my Pitaya Berry. So at this point, it was basically a wasted effort, and I threw away my Empoleon for nothing. So I just say, screw it, I'm just going to go ahead and go for a Surf, at least get the Torrent boost, as he goes ahead and knocks off and kills me. I do get a crit on the Surf, which was kind of nasty because his Light Screen was still up. I was in Torrent range, but it still should not have done that much. And that definitely did not go over too well. That was a bad crit. I was not happy with that crit. I mean, yes, it works out in my favor, but I hate getting stuff like that in my favor, honestly. It feels like it just... It kind of hurts to see. It kind of takes away from the game, I guess. I know it's part of the game, but it still hurts to see and makes me kind of feel a bit disgusted with how things fall in my favor. Anyway, after quite a bit, I'm going back and forth on what I actually want to send in to try to pick this thing off, and ultimately it ends up being Ragatha, just because at this point, I can get the plan of tracing Tablets of Ruin, which in front of Wo-Chien basically cancels it out. That's how the Ruin abilities work. If two are active at the same time, they basically neutralize each other. Not that it matters, I'm just going to use Mystical Fire, take this thing out, so live Wo-Chien reaction is now off the screen. But that means I now have Tablets of Ruin going in my favor, which should certainly help for whatever he wants to send in, because I believe outside of Indeedee and Blastoise, he pretty much has all physical attackers at this point. So whatever he sends in is most likely going to be subject to Tablets of Ruin, since that lowers attack. It ends up being the Tinkaton, which has an air balloon, which is a good thing to note, because that basically means Cryogonal does not want to be dealing with it, and I need to pop that air balloon if that's going to be the case. I debated switching into Gummy Goo for a moment, just because... I mean, I didn't think he would go for the Fairy move. I was certain he was probably going to go for the Gigaton Hammer, and I thought Gummy Goo was probably the best play, maybe even Kothmo. Ultimately, I decided, screw it, I've got the Tablets of Ruin up, I'm just going to Mystical Fire to pop that air balloon and get some damage off from this thing. He ultimately decides to set up Stealth Rocks, which is interesting, as I do proceed to pop the air balloon, get a decent chunk of damage off. Special attack lowered, but since what has Tinkaton ever cared about special attack? The thing is a physical attacker. Kind of. The more I think about it, the more interesting and bizarre Tinkaton's base stat spread is. Anyway, at this point, I decided to get Ragatha out of there because I know the Gigaton Hammer is incoming, and I want to get Jackson and get rid of these rocks immediately. That is basically my thought process here, as he does in fact go for the Gigaton Hammer, does a ton of damage to Jax, and I am honestly willing to let him go at this point as long as I get the spin off, just so that way these rocks are off my side of the field and I can go from there. As I believe he, does go for Play Rough, and that is Jax out of the picture. So I am down 5-4, but I don't think I'm necessarily in the worst of spots, just because I have plenty of options of what I can do here, and this Tinkaton has been chipped, the rocks are off my side of the field, so I am there are certainly worse spots I could be in. Plus, this thing's air balloon is popped, so if I wanted to, I could just go into Gummy Goo and blow it up with an Earthquake. I was heavily considering that, I believe. But ultimately, I feel this is the perfect opportunity to get Gangle in, get Gangle set up, and then proceed to hopefully go from there as I double-check. I double-check the health for a sec, because I'm pretty sure this thing is just out of range of a Tera Ground Tera Blast. I still Terrasilize anyway, just so I can get rid of the weakness, because he could very well Gigaton Hammer here, since he can't use it twice in a row, but he used Play Rough on the last turn. But I'm going to Terrasilize, I'm going to get an Acid Armor up, and I'm going to basically start setting Gangle up for what I believe would probably be the inevitable matchup with Hawlucha if it comes down to it. It definitely helps in dealing with this thing. There is definitely a lot of things that I would very much appreciate getting an Acid Armor up right now, so that is what I proceed to go ahead and do, as he just goes ahead and gets his rocks back up, which, completely fine play because my spinner is gone. I do not have spin on Gangle. I do just go for the Tera Ground Tera Blast to try to not necessarily take this thing out, because I was well aware it was out of range, but still at least do a ton of damage to it and put it close to death, as he does go for the Gigaton Hammer, and Gangle actually eats that pretty well thanks to the Acid Armor. So I have no reason not to go for another Tera Ground Tera Blast and pick this thing off and be done with it. So it was fun while it lasted, Tinkaton, Tinky Winky. Kind of noticing now in retrospect with, since I'm post-commenting, that all of these nicknames he's running are, Teletubby themed. I don't believe I picked up on that in my live commentary, but then again, that's what I get for trying to live com while partially asleep, I guess. Anyway, with Tinkaton gone, Blastoise comes in, and this is where things get interesting. Because I ultimately decided to go for a Freeze Dry. I debated going for Recover just in case to make sure I was healthy enough. But I figured the Freeze Dry would work just because if he is a bulkier set and just decides to go straight for the attack, then I can put him at a point where I can two-shot him. So that is why I decided to go for that. He does end up Shell Smashing, however, which is the exact scenario I was hoping for. Because he's going to get his defenses dropped, he's going to get his offensive stats raised, but that is going to pop Gangle's Mirror Herb, and Gangle is now in probably the best spot I could have ever put her in, because she has a +2 everything except for special defense. So Gangle is definitely sitting pretty right now, and I know I outrun this thing. I know another Freeze Dry is definitely going to kill it. Oddly enough, looking back at it in hindsight, he didn't have White Herb, which makes me curious what item he was actually running on those Blastoise, if not White Herb, to salvage the defenses. Which, in that case, looking back on it, as Blastoise is down and Indeedee comes out now, I guess I really didn't need the initial Freeze Dry. It was a precaution just in case, but with the defense drop, I definitely would have taken out with a Freeze Dry after the fact. It would have O-Code. Anyway, Indeedee's in now. The Psychic Terrain is up. And I think I'm trying to calc at this point what my game plan is going to be. Because even a +2, considering I have no special offensive investment at all because I went speed and bulk because of Hawlucha, I know even a +2, a Tera Ground, Tera Blast is not going to be able to pick this thing off. He goes for Shy Shock, which in the terrain is still going to do a chunk, but I mean, I do have the Acid Armor up, so it definitely helps. I just had to go ahead and recover up. There is going to be a bit of recover stalling here. I do definitely feel bad about it in hindsight as he goes for Expanding Force, which definitely takes a huge chunk out of me. I could have picked this thing off, but I was basically dreading at this point. It wasn't necessarily trying to stall out the terrain. It was a matter of trying to make sure Gangle was healthy for when this thing went down, because Hawlucha was definitely going to come in after the fact, and I wanted to be ready to knowingly eat a hit, even at +2 defense, to be able to go from there. He hits me with a Hyper Voice the second time, which reveals the Throat Spray. That is really interesting tech, the Throat Spray Hyper Voice on Indeedee. But at this point, I feel I'm healthy enough to take the risks with Hawlucha. So I go ahead, Tera Ground, Tera Blast, and Indeedee's out of there. Gangle is on a roll at this point with 3 KOs. Out comes the Hawlucha, and right away I notice no Psychic Seed pops, which has me really curious now what item was being run on this thing if not Psychic Seed Unburdened, because that felt like an obvious play, I guess. And Hawlucha definitely still would have outrun Gangle, but because it doesn't, I'm going to be able to fire for Freeze Dry, repeat the process here. Hawlucha and Haxorus both go down, and Gangle pretty much cleans up from here. So that is the end of that. So that is a thing that happened. GG to Kingler. I apologize for Cryogonal basically doing that to you. I mean, you would think I'd have grown used to these things happening and knowing what to say about it after everything I did with Gyarados in Season 4 of the UNPL, but I'm still at a loss for words. The fact that it happened is incredible because, I mean, I pulled my plan off. A bit of Cryogonal mad science there, but I have faith that you'll bounce back, Kingler. Your team is incredibly nasty. Your record is not a reflection of how dangerous that team is and how good of a player you are. But that is going to do it for this video and my post-com. Columbus Swoo are still undefeated. And now we move on to the last 3 weeks of the season now, I believe, to see if we can keep that undefeated way intact. So, thank you guys so very much for watching despite the post-com. I have been Ruppy, and my Columbus Swoo and I will see you guys next time. Take care.